Hello, hello. Endersword here again. We're going to be doing a Taskmaster contestant tier list. I think a new season of Taskmaster is soon to be upon us, and it's one of my favorite shows. Definitely, if you haven't checked it out, check it out on British TV. I think it's been on like 3 or 4 different channels, but you can find it on YouTube everywhere. Uh, Great little show. They get a bunch of comedians on to do silly little tasks and then score them. Um, and it's just kind of funny. It's almost hard to describe. It's just nonsense stuff, and then they have trouble doing it, and whatever. But there's been 12 seasons of the show, as well as a couple like mid-season like single episode specials and stuff like that. So it's been going pretty good for British TV, where things usually last like 3 seasons, which is a total of like 9 episodes. It's been doing pretty well. So figure we will attempt to rank these guys based largely on my memory of how they did in the show, but I guess a large part of it is if they're memorable or not. If I can kind of remember like highlights of the people, then that's a good sign for them. And another big part, since I've only got the little pictures, if I can even remember the people's names, is also going to be a standout. But a lot of these, I don't know if people watch British TV. I watch a lot of like the little comedy panel shows that they do, just little game shows and stuff where really the whole point of it is just to get a bunch of funny people on kind of yapping around and saying stuff. So that's where I knew a bunch of these folks from. And it's cool to see them in that sort of kind of unchained version where they're just told to go build a garage or throw an egg as high as you can without cracking it or whatever. So to kick things off, the first one is Aisling B. I believe is how you pronounce her name. She was in a number of things, but probably an American audience would know her for doing that show on, I think, Netflix with Paul Rudd, where he's like a clone of himself or something. She's quite entertaining. She did reasonably well, I think, in the program, like at the actual tasks. I'm not going to be, I guess I should address like my criteria. Largely, it's down to like who's the funniest, but also to some extent how either cleverly or kind of uniquely did they do some of the tasks in their show. Like if there's any key moments that I would remember. Her, I'm going to kind of put in probably the middle. I'm going to start her off. Her last name's B, so might as well put her in B tier to kick things off with. I think she's really funny on a lot of like panels and stuff. The thing with her is I remember a lot of her like in the studio speaking moments, but I don't remember a whole lot of her actually doing tasks in a funny way. I remember her like really failing a lot of them very quickly, which then leads to the panel part being kind of funny, but I don't remember her doing like super well or anything super creative as part of it. So I'll probably stick her there in the middle. Alan Davies is one of these guys that's kind of a bit of a reputation for being like a smart ass on some of the panel shows that they do there. He's often on a show called QI, where he kind of, just has a lot of witty things. I was happy to see him on the show, and I was almost a tiny bit disappointed in what he came up with. There wasn't a whole lot that was super, super clever about it, but it was still pretty good, like solid performer, not doing too bad. Again, I think he's another one that it was his moments like in the studio on the panel part that he did better on than the actual tasks themselves. This is Alice Levine. She is, to be honest, kind of boring. She didn't do things. She wasn't horrible. Like she's not like terrible at it, but I think she was just kind of a bit boring in how she did things. There was nothing super special about what she brought to it. I can't really remember like strong moments where like that was particularly funny or she did something particularly funny. I also can't really remember a lot like in the just in the show, anything like quotable or anything from her. So I'm going to put her in a C, not bad, but I think she also finished last in her season, which is odd. Usually, like the last place finisher is kind of a bumbling idiot type. She's not, but she still finished last out of it. This guy, I forget his name. I think Al. His name's Al. I forget what his last name is. I want to say Al Johnson, but I don't think that's it. It's Al something. But his whole thing, he was one of the earlier seasons, I think, and his whole thing was he kind of would like bribe people to do the tasks for him. The host in the show, well, Greg is the host, but then Alex is the one that's kind of with them doing the tasks. A lot of the times his solution was kind of a cheap, you move the bucket for me or you move the thing for me sort of things. And it was okay once or twice, but I think he pulled that lever too many times. And there's a couple things he did that were like just pretty repetitive. So it doesn't really stand out. I think if he had done a couple of those and then done different things, but he kind of tended to do the same sort of thing over and over, and that kind of ran out of steam for me. Asim Chowdhury is a pretty funny one. I thought he was pretty strong. Maybe almost between an A and a B. I think he got more into it and had some kind of funnier moments. He's just an overall really likable type of guy, and I'd probably put him on the A list here at least. I don't think he did like super well, but he did pretty well, and I just seems like someone that was very likable throughout it and kind of was trying. He did like he was good at kind of arguing his position or things like that. So I think pretty good. Bob Mortimer here. I think Bob Mortimer is definitely S tier. He walked this interesting line. So Bob Mortimer, if you've never seen him, is just this meandering, like stream of consciousness, crazy storyteller. His life makes no sense sort of thing. Just the stuff that comes out of his mouth is just almost complete nonsense at all times, but it kind of works together. He's just a really good like storyteller. And usually I think this type of character throughout the show tends to do really poorly because they're like, I think, caught up in trying to be funny to the point that they don't actually try and win the tasks. Whereas he tried to win the tasks in a funny way, but he was never not trying to do them well. And so in the end, he ended up winning his season, and I think did it really well, like without being kind of a try-hard on it. He was trying to do it in a flamboyant and funny way, but he was still trying to accomplish whatever the goal was. And there were times too, you can tell, often the people that act the dumbest are the smartest, because it's hard to convincingly act dumb unless you're actually really smart. And he kind of had those moments where it kind of cut through that he really did know how to do something or did know how things worked, and then kind of figured it out. And that would kind of just, his method would be really, really good. And that would just kind of come through. So I think he's definitely top tier. Caroline Ritchie, is that her name was? Charlotte Ritchie. Charlotte Ritchie is her name. One of the more recent seasons. I think she's probably, she's just kind of a cute character, but she wasn't good at anything, particularly. I'm going to put her as kind of like a middling sort of thing, where she wasn't particularly like clever in it, but she kind of was very earnest in everything that she did. So I think that's kind of good. But yeah, not strong way or the other. Definitely not someone that people would dislike, but not someone that rose to the top sort of thing. This, I think her name is Daisy Mae Cooper. She was very entertaining in her almost incompetence and rage. So I think while she may not have come across as like a very likable person to a lot of people, and I don't think she was, I think she was such a strong personality in the show that her being angry and like comically angry about how a lot of things went actually worked really well for the rest of the thing. She like flipped out on her partner a few times and just would get so mad at the tasks and how they came out that I think despite being horribly bad at them, a lot of the time she definitely was a character in the whole thing. This guy, what was his name? I forget this dude's name. I know I think they have it. If I do this, I think it will tell me. Dave Gorman. Okay, yeah. He has a show on his own where he talks about, I don't know, something. It's kind of like not a skit show, but I don't know what it is. He'll do something silly like call up a bunch of newspapers and try and sell them the same fake story and kind of see who runs it, or it's something like that, like kind of not really a prank show, but I don't know, hard to describe, but something like that where there's one or two premises in the show and he'll explore how do people react to this or what will happen if we do that sort of thing. But which is, I think it's called Dave Gorman's Okay Modern Life, or I don't know, something like that. But he was kind of I like him overall, but I think in the end he was overall a bit boring. So I'd probably say towards the C side of things. So not great, not super. He has his moments, but he tends to be more of a drier, lower key humor to things, which I think just kind of got washed out in the season that he was in. I think he's a better comedian when he is like on his own sort of thing. And when you put him in a group, it doesn't really stand out as much. But I do like his little show on his own. This guy, David Baddiel, this guy was absolutely terrible at everything, but again, just kind of hilarious as a character on the show. He was just the assumptions and things that he tried to do that he thought would work made no sense, and he was just a level of incompetence. Like he's possibly one of the most incompetent people that they had on the thing, but again, that's kind of what the show is, so I don't really want to not reward him for that. I think he goes into the A again as a prop, almost similar to she is the embodiment of rage, and he was the embodiment of the incompetence and kind of just looking silly that they would expect from things. And he just kind of threw himself into it, but he didn't. And you could tell that he genuinely believes that some things would work, and they just didn't at all. This one, I think her name was Desiree. She was on one of the more recent seasons. I think she's kind of middling as well. There was a couple moments that stood out as like a bit funny, but I don't know that she was. I think she was on one of the weaker seasons overall, unfortunately, too. Just even in some of the tasks that they actually gave them. So it didn't really, I think, let them shine as much. But I think she maybe goes into a kind of boring-ish C position. Wasn't really a standout. And like off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything in particular that she did that was really like funny, clever, good, anything like that. The one that jumps to mind is one where like kind of the task itself broke on her, but that wasn't really anything she did. It was just kind of what happened. Doc Brown, he was kind of almost too cool for school sort of thing, and I know that from interviews afterwards he didn't seem to even like being on the show, or at least that's what he expressed, that he didn't get it. He didn't really like being there. I think he was on the second season, so he probably didn't really know what the show was. I think he's a rapper in the UK, So I think maybe it's just not with his image. He did do a few things that were kind of memorable, but he did like one, he had to make up a nursery rhyme and he punched a fish or something. But other than that, I can't really remember much about him that stands out. And I think just because he didn't, everything about it seemed like he didn't want to be there or he wasn't having fun. I kind of think puts him in a lower category. This is Ed Gamble, probably the biggest super fan of the show. He does like a podcast now after he was on it to interview all the, actually it was the interview with him that he kind of said that he just didn't like it. Basically was the impression I got. He's super intense, but almost because he was so intense, he was really try-harding a lot more. So I think he's got to go in a B, that he's so into it that he wasn't trying silly things. He was just trying to do the task. And I don't want them to do silly things to like throw it, but like Bob Mortimer kind of did silly stuff, but it still got the job done. He kind of just went rude A and just did whatever he thought would genuinely work the best. And that was a bit odd. He had some really funny, like in studio type moments, but overall I think kind of a B tier. This guy's name, Frank Skinner, I think his name is. He did pretty well, but I think he's kind of in the B tier as well here. He had a few funny moments that are just kind of seem out of character for kind of a, fairly distinguished looking gentleman or something. I don't know what he is. A lot of these people you can tell come in the show with a personality that if you're not from the UK, you're probably not super aware of. So it's hard to know when someone like that I hadn't seen before. He was funny enough, likable enough. He did like okay, but nothing was like a super big standout to it. And so I think kind of putting him in the mid tier seems pretty good. Guz Khan kind of had some funny moments as well. Almost want to push into an A, but I think he's another one that's kind of in a B. That he definitely had, like his personality comes through a lot in what he's doing, but there was nothing like super standouts that he did that kind of makes him rise to the top tier of things that I would really think of. This is, why do I forget his name? Because I like this guy. What's his name? I'm gonna kick myself as soon as. Yeah, Hugh Dennis, right? Hugh Dennis. Him, I thought, again, I really like him on shows and stuff. And I think he does comedy, does like stand up and stuff. And I think he's really good in that. And he does like a lot of improv type stuff on those sorts of shows. But he didn't fully shine, I think, on this. And again, there's always a little bit of a thing of if you're someone that's like trying to win or something, I think it somehow does hinder sometimes your ability to kind of be funny because they care a little too much. And you almost want to do the doing well but without caring. And then you can still be really funny in how you do it because it's the style points you're going for, even though you're trying to go for the task as well. So yeah, I think that. This guy, what's this guy's name again? I kind of liked him. He got really emotional as well, but I'm going to put him in a B too. I'm again going to space on his name. Ian Sterling. Yeah, I never would have pulled that out. Ian Sterling, I think he was on season 8 of the thing. And yeah, again, he got like really into it, but he was like pretty funny in how he did it. So definitely not like one of the lower tier guys, but not enough to kick him up. Jamali here, I think, is definitely a solid A. He came in one of the later seasons, I think 10 or 11, and he really was kind of counterculture to the show, where where he was the first contestant that was almost like over it. That he came in a much later season. He hadn't like openly admitted that he hadn't watched it, and he kept pushing back at the idea of like being judged in the first place or caring about this. So he was very much like I don't care, but he kind of did care a little. So he would like try stuff, but then if it didn't work, wasn't too bothered by it. And I think that worked really well because he would kind of try, he was flipped between trying something really creative to see if it would work and then not really care if it did work or not. Or have you ever seen the meme of the guy that like sees someone do something complicated and then he does it in a simple way and is like showing how simple this could be? And he kind of did that for a few tasks where it's like transport this thing as far as you can. And so he just picked it up and walked it as far as he could and threw it like in the most simple way. So there's a few times that he just kind of cut through and did the most straightforward thing. And then there were times that he came up with something elaborate or whatever. And he did a lot of like arguing in the studio, kind of arguing with Alex, arguing with Greg. I thought that was really funny. Him and Greg's interaction throughout the entire thing was really funny because he's kind of the first guy to like not trying, like kind of stand up to Greg, but in the way of not I'm trying to get one over on you, but just I don't really care what you're doing and I'm not falling for your tricks anymore sort of thing. So he just, I just thought it played really well. James Acaster, I think has got to go in pretty much the S tier. I think he's had probably some of the most funny moments. He wasn't like as good at everything as some of the others, and a lot of the times you could tell he had just forgotten what the task actually was and just went off doing something. But when he did do it really well, he tended to do it like really, really well. He did like a whole reenactment. They were supposed to reenact video games, and he did a whole reenactment of GTA. And a few good things that were like, pretty on point. But then other times he would just kind of wander off and do whatever for no reason and it made no sense. But he alternated between those really good performances where he like made up a song or whatever, and then times where he was supposed to build a tower and just didn't do it or whatever. But just overall, like kind of everything he says is funny. And pretty much everything he does is funny. And there kind of wasn't much of an in-between there. Jessica Knappett is, I think, overall a pretty funny person as well. She told some great stories on the show, had some good tasks. She really, really threw herself into it. And that kind of came across as well. I think they were on the same season. So I think it played, actually, they played off each other fairly well. A few times that I think worked. But she was probably kind of I don't know if I can think of like super good task things, but she was really good in the studio, really tried hard. At one point, I think fell off a stage from overdoing something. So she was quite good. Joe Brand, I think, is kind of, again, this sarcastic, like I don't care sort of person, but less effort, a little less engaged. I think she ultimately did do fairly well in the show. I forget if she even won her season. I'm trying to think of who did that time, but I think pretty well. There were times when she clearly just was like, whatever, don't worry about it. We're not going to bother with it. But then there were times that she did get pretty engaged. And I think because she had a almost character of being really lazy about everything, that she found creative ways to do things a lot of the time that were the lazy way to do it. And I think that worked pretty well. Joe Lycett, I think I really, really like him on a lot of things. He's got his own show, which is almost like a comedy consumer protection show, if that makes sense, where he like It's almost like a John Oliver type of thing where, but instead of just ranting about, consumer injustice, he like goes out and like ambush interviews people or plays pranks on a company or something like that to like call attention to some sort of consumer injustice thing. And I think he's quite a funny guy. He at one point changed his name to Hugo Boss because Hugo Boss had sued a small company that was named Boss Brewery or something. So he made news for that, and that's kind of his whole thing, is like getting justice for the little guy, whatever, but in like a very comedic way. So him I really like, but I think on the show itself, it didn't come through as well. I think he was on, again, one of the first seasons, so maybe they hadn't found the rhythm yet. Because I think he's definitely better in a lot of other things, but I think maybe this just wasn't really the format for him. But I think he's really generally really funny. This guy, another Joe, I forget what his last name is, Joe something, and what is it, Joe? I don't know. I'll check again. Joe Thomas. Okay. Wasn't going to remember that. And for that, again, kind of a forgettable, sort of somewhat boring guy. Did his best, did like an okay job, but again, nothing really stood out for me there. Just kind of a, C-list type of player. Joe Wilkinson, I think, did really, really well. He's kind of, on almost everything he's on, he's supposed to be this like extremely awkward, like super weird guy on a lot of the things he does. And he kind of comes across as that, but you could see kind of, because they're doing tasks in a competition, you could see the actual him underneath it come out a lot as like he was actually trying to do things. And I think he had one of the single best moments in the show. And I think he was on the first season. I think this is either the first or second season, where, he had a really, really good moment where he did something really well, but then very mildly technically broke a rule by putting like the toe of his foot over a line onto a mat that he wasn't allowed to be on, sort of thing. And then they took it away from him and stuff. And I thought that was really good. And it kind of set a lot of the tone for the whole series. I think it was the second season of the thing, because it was with him, Joe, and a few of these other folks, Catherine Ryan. So I think it really, really set like the tone for it. And I think he was really good at that. Like, I'm trying really hard to do something, and I'm doing it in a really creative way sometimes. And just this kind of one of the better characters for it. I think that whole season was like pretty key in setting the tone for what was supposed to be the show, basically. This guy was only on the I think his name's John. He was only on like the New Year's special, so it was just like a single episode. So kind of for that, I'm going to put him in a C. It was only on that one time anyway. So you didn't really get to see him over a full season. And I don't particularly remember him standing out as anything in particular. So they kind of going to put him there. Johnny Vegas. Johnny Vegas is another one. I don't know if I'd call him an A or a B. I think he did a lot of like, he was very funny, but he wasn't very good at anything for sure. I think I'd put him in, I just like the guy on most things, so I probably would put him in an A. He had definitely a lot of moments where he was kind of the sad sack sort of character in the whole thing, but I think he had enough funny moments or conclusions in tasks or like decisions that he made that did kind of set him apart, at least from the B tier, so I'll put him up there. John Richardson, another guy that I really like in like all the panel shows he does, and his stand-up and stuff is really good. And he's kind of this fastidious little guy. And I think it was interesting seeing a guy like that. That generally, it's interesting when a guy is known for like competence in general, doing stuff that they're then incompetent at, and like kind of really struggling with it. So I'm gonna put him in a B as well. Not really a negative at all, just not a super standout. He's a lot better again in the studio speaking than he was actually doing the things on his own. I think when he's on his own doing stuff, it wasn't as impressive. But when he's got people to kind of like play off, he just says a lot of very witty and clever things, but it doesn't come through as well when he's just trying to do something. Josh Whittaker, probably, I don't know if I want to say C. I don't remember a lot out of him. I kind of think that he had one of the better. I'll throw him up here because he had one of the top like task prize thingies. He got a tattoo on his foot of the host's name for one of the tasks, which was kind of above and beyond what anyone else had done. So I think that alone probably puts him one step above. And I think he was on the very first season. So again, I think that sets the tone for kind of the direction it's going to go, if I'm remembering that right. But yeah, he basically got his foot tattooed with the host name on it, which is something. Catherine Parkinson is probably quite possibly the worst actual contestant there was, and was genuinely upset at how bad she was doing by the end of it. And there was unfortunately little, again, not unlikable or anything, but there was very little humor in what she was doing. She was trying her hardest at everything in a not very funny way, and then just failing at basically everything. And she just finished last, did everything like quite badly. She never quite got what the idea of the whole thing was. And I think she's something of like a serious actress, like a stage and movie actress that like is quite serious leaning. So it just never quite came through. Usually the majority of these people are comedians of some kind, and she's not. So I think it just didn't quite click. It didn't quite work. And there were times when she was just visibly upset and on the verge of tears. And I think is not really in the spirit of what they were trying to do with the show. Yeah, so whatever. Catherine Ryan, I think I like her in general. She's from Canada. I'm Canadian as well. I think she's really clever. I think she tried really well, but she was also willing to do things like she was trying to do things in an unorthodox way to accomplish things really well. So she wasn't doing things straightforward. But she had kind of her eyes on the prize sort of thing, and she was willing to kind of take an odd angle to get there. So I kind of like that sort of unorthodox sort of thing. And her caring, it meets her personality fairly well. So like her whole angle on things is as kind of like almost the quintessential like strong independent woman sort of thing, and also this like fish out of water thing, which she literally is as a Canadian living in the UK. It worked really well, I think, for the show, that she was kind of trying to find loopholes around everything. And again, she was in the second season for it, so I think her approach really said a lot for how the show moved, and she won that season. So yeah, I think quite good in setting the tone for the whole thing. This is Katie Wicks. She was pretty bad at stuff, and unfortunately she also got, I think, sick in the middle of their series, and she had a few episodes where she wasn't there. There's not a lot that I remember about her that's like, anything that she did that was particularly memorable or good. I think she kind of falls into a C category for me. Just not a lot there. Carrie Godleman did pretty well. She was probably at least an A tier. She won her season, I believe. And yeah, just kind of found ways to do things with sometimes like flummoxed by things, or it was kind of funny to see the misunderstandings she had at times, but she tended to just kind of power her way through things. And there was a very, I don't know what to call it, almost like an innocence, but like a brash innocence to how she proceeded with things. It was like the straightforward way, but almost like a naive interpretation of what she was supposed to do, but then still did it really well. So I thought that was pretty good. This guy, he was also only on one episode of the thing, which was like the New Year's special that they did. But frankly, I just hate this guy. He's a news reporter, but he does a lot of like really dickish interviews with people. So like I've seen him interview, like he'll do like a celebrity interview where he'll try and like ambush them with something out of Left Wing in like a really kind of scuzzy and unfair way. And he's got this really smarmy approach to him. And I just don't like the actual guy. And seeing him on the show didn't help my impression with that at all. So I think he's definitely a D, and he was only on a single episode anyway. So there was nothing that kind of made me like him any more than I already didn't. Lee Mack, I really did like from his show Would I Lie to You, and I've seen like his stand-up and stuff over time. I wanted him to be better. I wanted him to, like, he's such a clever and quick guy that I thought he might stand out as like an S tier type of person. I still thought he was quite good for the show, and he had a lot of like, I think he approached it in a fairly like meta way sometimes, where he was trying to analyze what was going on and kind of look for the loopholes and look for the things. But the fact that he looked for them and was largely missing them, or the loophole he found actually had a catch in it and then he kind of failed, turned out to be fairly entertaining. It wasn't what I thought he was going to do, which is just straight up approach it in a very clever way and win. He didn't, but I still thought that it was pretty entertaining how he did things, because he tried to exploit the loopholes to things and failed, or tried to metagame things and failed in a lot of ways. And I thought that was pretty entertaining, at least. Lisa Tarbuck, I think. She's kind of middle of the road to me as well. Probably a C. There's nothing super standout that I kind of remember. She's almost, to me, she's a cheerier Joe Brand, in that a lot of the time she alternated to like, I don't care, whatever. But then there were times where she was cheerfully trying to do things, and she was also like just cynically cheating some of the time and so on. So okay, but not certainly not a standout. Lolly was kind of funny. There was one or two things where she stood out, but then a couple of things too where she was just kind of so incompetent that it almost strained believability. So I think she kind of sits in a C as well. That I don't know, didn't really stand out a whole lot to me. There were one or two moments like her playing hide and seek or something that worked fairly well, but other than that, I don't really think. Lou Saunders, probably to me a B. I think kind of no one from this season was a particularly strong candidate, but she was just kind of did fairly well for the crowd she was in. But there were funny moments, but there wasn't anything super clever about it, and I don't think the whole thing was kind of highlight reel sort of stuff. I think there's a lot of like compilations online of like the funniest moments of this or this or this, and you're almost never going to see anyone from this whole season in any of them, just kind of the way that it was. So I think, not a standout, but kind of middle tier. Mark Watson, I believe. I like this guy, but I think again he was probably in just the middle of the pack sort of thing. He had some funny moments, some clever moments. He did try and like approach some things in some fairly clever way. It's often the funniest when someone does come up with a clever thing to do, but then it fails. And I think he had a few of that sort of thing. And there's also just kind of a humbleness or quiet humbleness about him that kind of worked really well for when he didn't do well, sort of thing. So that was kind of good. Mawan Rizwan, I think he is entertaining enough that that I'm gonna put him in an A. He just had a really strong personality throughout the whole thing. He was really, really excited about a lot of stuff. Like you could tell he was trying really hard a lot of the time. And there was a few hits that he had that were like genuinely really, really good. He has one kind of highlight reel moment where he has to make an animal disappear as his task. And he actually does it like a really good way, like a almost magician level way, because that's kind of what they were going for. But I think he did it probably at a level that they weren't really expecting, where, yeah, it was just quite good. And he had a few moments like that were like just pretty high level and just kind of brings it, brought a lot of enthusiasm to that whole series. Mel Gedroich is also probably on the A tier. Everything to her was amazing. She's super, super enthusiastic about everything and was just like happy to be there, and then just tried her hardest and did really well. And I believe she won that season. I'm pretty sure. So yeah, I think she's definitely a solid A, just out of almost sheer enthusiasm. Mike Wozniak is just a crazy person, apparently. I think he probably goes in the S tier as well. Basically, for almost being a merger between like these two, of like the crazy older man with just the nonsensical, theatrical, whatever sort of approach. Everything was over the top. Everything was like super, yeah, just didn't make a lot of sense. And just a really, really good character. He had some like very quotable lines in it. He had some very good tasks that were done both well and horribly badly, that just worked really well in the show. And he was just super, super entertaining. And then I think on the final week, his like prize task was shocking, as he carved a mohawk into his head and had it under a hat and revealed it. So that was pretty good. This one, what's her name? Morgana, I believe. I had only seen her. I'd seen her on shows as like, she always played this character that like is kind of her comedy character, and I had never seen her as herself until this show. So that was kind of interesting once I realized they were the same person. But I think other than that, she was kind of just not a huge standout here. Kind of had her moments, but not really much of anything that's super memorable. This one, I forget her name. Whatever. She was again on the single season, or the single episode, like New Year's special, and she's pretty funny. But I'd almost put her, yeah, if she was on a full series, I think she could have been funny enough to kind of carry it. But for just being there that one episode, she didn't really do anything particularly well, but she was good at kind of the banter with the rest of them in the studio. But again, it was a single episode, so I think she's going to have to sit in the C. Nish Kumar was kind of the absolutely hilariously bad. He was just so bad at everything that it just stood out as very, very funny. And so I think that alone puts him in an A for just being one of the better characters throughout the show. He's possibly, up there as one of the most incompetent, probably with him and David Baddiel. I don't know who technically scored the lowest in their season, or whether the scores are even comparable, because there were different numbers of episodes even across them. But yeah, I think it's between these two for kind of the most incompetent, and actually Catherine Parkinson, but she's not funny. She did it in kind of in a way that just made you feel bad for her. But these two were just funny and just kind of plowing through, doing their own thing. Noel was also really good. He had some of the most clever stuff. He's kind of that like crazy character, but it is clearly very intelligent underneath it all, and also clearly capable underneath it all. That doesn't match what his image is of being this kind of like weird emo goth thing. That you could tell he's actually also very athletic, and he's actually also very intelligent and very artistic and all this stuff. And that kind of came through a lot in the show, that there was another like level to him, that he could just pull out these strong performances whenever he felt like it. And we had Paul Chowdhury, I believe. He was pretty good. I think he had some really good moments, and he's like a unique personality again. He was this very understated person that was just kind of very tried, but was very like dismissive of everything as well. And I think that kind of lands him in the middle of the pack. That he could have, I don't know, he never quite got into a rhythm of like being really good at anything, but he was just kind of quietly, consistently bad, but kind of you knew what to expect from him, sort of thing. So a good like solid character for the staff, but or for the show, but not really a standout. Same with this guy. I think was his name also Paul, I believe, and I think he's from another show, so he's meant to be like a very intelligent dude. That, what is his name? I think it is Paul, right? Yeah, Paul Sinha. Yeah, I think he's on the show there called The Chase, where he's like contestants play against him in like trivia or something. And so he's kind of like a super good like trivia player, and he can do like memorization tricks. There's one task they did, which I'm pretty sure they designed just for him, knowing he'd be on it, where they had to memorize the order and contents of a deck of cards, and he basically nailed it like completely. And some of them were just made up cards, like the 15 of diamonds and stuff like that. So yeah, he's just a very like intellectual type person, but then to see him on these physical tasks or things that you actually had to do practically, just really fail at them, was kind of amusing to see kind of a fall apart of common sense on that sort of thing. So, and he again was trying to metagame a lot of the time, which kind of worked in some cases, but not in others. But yeah, kind of a mid-tier sort of person. Philip Wang, I thought was pretty funny. I think possibly the cast of this whole season, as I'm realizing from the background pictures, I think just is probably the strongest season of the whole thing. And I think this was the third season. Yeah, just overall really, really good. And everyone kind of was funny, and I'm seeing who's next. And definitely, I think that's the case. That they were all just kind of really hitting on all cylinders sort of thing. And he was just kind of, everything was ridiculous. He was, again, remarkably bad at everything, but everything was just funny enough and creative enough, inventive enough sort of thing, that it really was, it did work. Rod Gilbert, I'm going to put it the same thing. So definitely, I think in this season we had one S and like 4 A's that really carried it. And I think this was the third season. So I think, again, kind of really helped solidify the show as what it was. So yeah, Rod Gilbert, again, it worked really well that he's good friends with Greg, who's the host of the show, and he's just a very obstinate person. His whole like comedic personality is being disagreeable and being really weird and stuff. So I think it worked for the show that he would often take a very oppositional or disagreeable stance on things, and it just kind of worked. And he definitely was the type that was looking for every loophole in the entire thing, trying to find a way to exploit every rule in like the most cynical way, but in like the funniest way. That if it was a loophole that wasn't funny, then forget about it. But if he could do the loophole in a funny way, then he did it. And he did like a number of times, like moving a hole in the ground, or he was supposed to tie himself up, but instead tied Alex up, or something like that. So things like that worked really well. This guy was on the season with Daisy May Cooper, who yelled and screamed at him a lot. I think his name is Richard. He I thought was pretty good. He worked really well playing against other people, so I think was kind of a B tier sort of player. There weren't like strong standouts, I think, on his own, but yeah, just worked well with the way the cast was. Then there is Richard Osman. He's again another one of these guys that's supposed to be like quite intellectual on everything, so it's kind of, you expect him to do really well in figuring out these tasks, but I think he almost did that to the point that it sacrificed a lot of the comedy in what he could have done. So I think he kind of sits at a B, whereas I think I would have expected a lot better. I think if you're going to come on and be like the smart guy, then you've got to be like quite intelligent and quite clever at it. And I think he was like half clever, but didn't really get it done. And so far, I think in all the seasons, there hasn't been someone that just plain was outsmarting everything. They were like occasionally nailing one or two where they just nailed it. But I think there's enough variation to where there just isn't always a super clever trick to everything, or they're under so much time pressure that they just can't do it, or they come up with something that seemed like a good idea, but it doesn't really work in practice, sort of thing. And I think that sort of marrying the intellectual person with the practicality, the intellectual people, which like Richard was and Paul was and a few others are, it didn't really play. It didn't really work. Like, I think if you're going to pull that off, you have to be dominant. But to come in as the intelligent one and not dominate, it just, then you're not dominating and being super clever, and you're not being funny that much, so it just doesn't kind of work. But he's still middle tier sort of thing. Rob Beckett, here he's pretty funny as well. He's just kind of like just not good at a lot, but I think he's funny enough in his reactions, and funny enough in that he's trying all the time and whatever, and just kind of failing, that again he kind of sits in the middle of the tier category there. And again, I like him on other shows, but he wasn't like a super standout here or anything. Roisin Kennedy, she's another one where she's really good friends with the host of the show, Greg. They did a sitcom together for years, and she's just very funny, but she's funny essentially for being incompetent and like bad at stuff and just kind of not in control. And so I think again she's probably a B. There wasn't anything particularly clever or good or like super strong out of her, but it was funny to see the interaction between the two and just kind of her struggle at stuff and kind of fail. Ramesh is possibly the closest thing to very clever and successful at it. The drawback to him, I think he was on the very first season, and there was that was less episodes. I think the first season was only 5 or 6 episodes, and then they eventually lengthened it, so you didn't get to see as much of it. He definitely had a few things where it was like, here's the solution to it, and I'm just going to do the solution, and it's kind of smart. And then he had a couple other things where he did kind of fumble at it or miss an obvious thing. I think he's an A tier. I know a lot of other people might put him in the S. I think he's hurt a little by the fact that the season was short and that they didn't know what the show really was yet at the time. But I think he did really well in a few things. There's definitely a couple like highlight reel type things for him. Rose Matafeo, I'm gonna put her probably in the B here as well. She was pretty funny. She's again like probably funnier in the studio talking than she was like actually doing the tasks themselves. But she had a few like kind of just funny, quirky, like she had a very quirky approach to everything, which I think worked fairly well. But yeah, just not like a big standout. What's his name again? I want to say it can't be Rob. Russell Howard is his name. He had a few good, probably out of everyone on the entire thing, other than just in the last season, which isn't on here, they had a professional athlete as part of it. But aside from that, out of all these like comedians and actors and stuff, he's probably the most athletic person that was on the show. So any of the things like kick a soccer ball, throw a cricket ball, stuff like that, he was just nailing. Just out of like the athletic ability of it, but and he did like okay on the other stuff, but I don't think he was a big standout. I think he's probably sitting in a B as well. Yeah, just like nothing. Probably his like most memorable moment was him like knock over a wicket with the cricket ball the first time. Well, if you play cricket, I have played cricket twice. But if you play cricket, then you just do that. Like it's just kind of that's like being a pitcher in baseball, like hit the catcher's glove. Well, if you're a pitcher, you could do that. Like if you've ever even played casually, you can just do it, whereas most people haven't done it. So he just on the first pitch did it, and it was kind of nothing, which is kind of like if someone said hit a target with a hockey puck, yeah, okay, it might take me 1 or 2 tries sort of thing, whereas if you'd never played hockey, of course you'd be very hard. So it was just that sort of thing. He did well on that sort of task, but I don't think it was a particular standout and everything else. This guy, I don't know what his name is. I think he's from like one of those shows, Ryan Clark, I guess. I don't know. He's from some show in the UK, like a, Strictly Come Dancing or, Top Model type of thing or whatever, but one of the reality shows. He was on the single episode, like New Year's special as well, but I thought he was probably the best person on that show. He's just a funny guy, and he did things in a funny way. Did really good like banter in the studio sort of thing. You could just tell he was a funny dude. He was one that had he been in a full season, I think he would have done like probably been higher rated. But he was only on the single episode, so I'll throw him in a B. But he's definitely like the highest rated single episode guy, I think. Sally, I wanted to say Sally Field. It's not Sally Field. Sally something. What's her name? Sally Phillips, of course. She is just a good actress and a good comedic actress. She was on like the show Veep as like the president of Finland or something, and she's just got like a good dry humor to her and is just like quite funny. I thought she was, I don't know if she's quite an A. She didn't, I think she is. To me, I think she was funny enough that she's up there. She probably wasn't as super strong in the tasks themselves, but she has a very like weird, like I think she's an actress and director and does just weird, is a weird person and does weird things on the side. So there were things that she kind of incorporated in to it that were kind of like filmmaking or whatever to various things, and I think was just kind of funny and kind of put on a character throughout the entire thing that worked really well. So I think she's kind of memorable to me. Sarah Kendall is, to me, kind of one of the worst winners because I think she won the season, but she's really boring. And she even kind of acknowledged a few times in the show how boring what she was doing was. That she just kind of did the tasks in the way that they asked them to do it. And she just kind of figured it out and stuff. And I also don't necessarily think they gave them some of the best tasks that season, but she just kind of like did stuff and in a fairly straightforward sort of way. And it was smart enough to win, but there's not a lot that stood out that was like funny, super entertaining or whatever. Whereas she was on the same season as like Lee Mack, who failed in funnier, kind of clever ways, but was more of like a showman about it. And I kind of think that she wasn't. It just didn't work as well for me. Sarah Pascoe, she was kind of struggling throughout. She was, I think, on the season with Rob there. I don't know. I almost want to say kind of a C. I think there were elements where she just didn't really get it, exactly what was happening. I think it was a bit on the boring side. She did well when they put them in teams. I think it was a little bit better. But on her own, there were just kind of like not really a lot going on there. And again, it was kind of early days and they didn't really know what the rhythm was. This lady, probably I'll throw in a D as well. She was again on the single episode for the New Year's special. Didn't really stand out. Like I literally can't remember a single thing that she did in the show. I can remember a couple things she said like on the panel in the studio, but I can't remember a single task that she actually did in any sort of way. Sean Gibson is almost a C in that she didn't do a lot that was like clever or anything, but I think she was just kind of like cute and cheerful enough that she was trying, and kind of her reactions to failing, like she did things pretty badly. And I think often when you do it badly, you're either like kind of the lumbering oaf or idiot, like Nish or David Baddiel, but there's also kind of the failing in a impish sort of way that it was kind of like cute or funny to see the failure or the reaction to it. And I think she's kind of in that category, so I'll put her in the middle. This is Tim Key. I think he was on the first season as well. And I think he probably... he did a few like funny things where he tried to cheat throughout it. And I think that worked fairly well. And I think, again, it helped kind of set the tone that like playful cheating is funny and allowed, but you're going to get called out for it when they catch you, sort of thing. So I think that kind of works fairly well there. So I think I'm on board with that. And he's pretty good. This guy, Tim Vine, he's kind of the oaf sort of thing, just kind of silly. But I think maybe not silly in like a as impressive way as some of the other kind of dunces for the thing. But he seems just like a funny, kind of strange little man. And then lastly here we have Victoria Corin Mitchell, who is was at least, I don't know if she still is, but a professional poker player, but also hosts a game show, which is again one of these like very intellectual things. And she's overall just a very intellectual type person, like known for reading six or eight books at the same time and just very highbrow topics and whatever. Comes across as like this very kind of dignified person. So kind of seeing her on a show like this and then doing quite badly in a lot of cases was funny. But then when they threw her a task that was clearly like something that you could intellectually brute force your way through, she just did and just kind of took over. Like they gave them like a code cracking test at one point, and she just kind of dominated that. So it was kind of interesting seeing the contrast there, but then see her reaction to things like they gave them a task where they had to ride a bike, and she literally does not know how to ride a bike, had never learned. So that sort of thing was kind of funny. I'm going to put her in the middle just because I thought it was really interesting to see her in that environment, although she didn't do very well. The person that I really, really most want to have on the show is her husband, David Mitchell, who does a show with Lee Mack and has had a number of other like sitcom type shows and a sketch comedy show called Mitchell and Webb that was on for several seasons. And I really, he's the one that comes across as, again, pedantically intellectual, like argumentative and like really nitpicky, that sort of thing. And I think he'd be really hilarious to see in a show like this where he has to practically do something as opposed to just argue the semantics of a thing. And I think that would be really good. But he's actually fairly similar to his wife in a lot of ways. So it would be interesting to see that. But he's a little bit more of a kind of goof than she is. But yeah, I think that would be a really, really good addition to it. So I think this is my overall list. And it ended up balancing reasonably well here. So we're a little bit stacked on the high side. But we ended up with 4 S's and 4 D's, which I'm pretty happy with here. And maybe I'm being a little too mean to Doc, but I'm pretty solid on these 3 being down here. And it could be that a few people in the B's were being a little generous and they probably should have been down here in the C. I'm already kind of looking. Ian probably could have come down. And maybe even Frank Skinner could have come down, that sort of thing. But overall, I think this is approximately where I'd put them. I'm curious what other people would think if you've watched it all. I know people have strong preferences for some people, or, you know, maybe you're a pre-existing fan of them or whatever. I tried to not let that influence too much. There's a lot of these people that I really am a fan of their other work, but I didn't think it worked as well when you're on this sort of show. It didn't shine through, or almost because of that old personality, it didn't quite come through because you're almost trying to play your other public character on a show where it didn't really fit or something like that, and which I found was often the case with the kind of more intellectual folks. But yeah, curious what other people think. Also, if you had different criteria, you can obviously tell from this how well someone actually did at the program. In the tasks wasn't a huge criteria to me. It was more how amusing they were. And if you did something well in an amusing way, I think that was kind of like double points. And that's why I kind of think Bob Mortimer probably is like the S+ tier for doing really well in an amusing way. And then maybe a close second being Catherine, who, again, in a very obtuse way, did a lot of the things. But also here are 2 people that kind of failed in hilarious ways a lot of the time. But again, were very entertaining. So that was kind of more my criteria, who was the most entertaining and who fit in with like the feel of the show and what you wanted out of some of your contestants the most, as opposed to just who did the best, because that would have been fairly easy to do just based on their actual performance. But yeah, leave some comment if you think any of these are wrong, if you think I'm off base, if you really liked anyone else to move up, move way down, especially if you hated anyone else. There wasn't really that anyone that I kind of came out with and been like, I don't like that person, or like that person was dislikable, because I think even Doc and Catherine were still likable at the end of it, It's just with him, it seemed like he wasn't having a good time, and with her, it seemed like she wasn't having a good time by the end of it. And if the contestant is not having fun, then I think that really detracts from it. And this guy is probably the only guy. I just don't like that guy. So that was probably the one I'm most influenced coming in on, and he was only there one episode. The other thing that I kind of, since I touched on it, I'd love to see a season where David Mitchell was part of it. I'm trying to think what other comedians that it would be cool to throw in here that come from other walks of things. One guy that I don't really think would do it because his career, he probably just doesn't need the money, and his personality is such that he wouldn't subject himself to it. Jimmy Carr would probably be decent at it, but he's kind of got this like aloof, cynical character that he probably wouldn't bother to do it. I'm not sure who else. Rob Brydon might be okay. Again, he's on the host of the show with Lee Mack and David Mitchell. Would be something to do. It would, trying to think who else is kind of missing. I think they've covered a lot of the main bases of comedians that I know in Britain. Of course, I'm not from Britain, so I kind of only know it remotely from watching like some of their shows sometimes. But if they're not on some of those panel shows, then I guess I don't know them. The other guy that might be funny, there's a guy named Henning Vaughn, a German comedian but lives in the UK and is on those shows a lot. I think he'd be really good to have on there. But yeah, any other ideas, throw them below. I think they've announced the most recent cast, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. And this doesn't include season 13 in the rankings here at all. But yeah, there you go. So yeah, let me know. And moving on to another tier list soon.